Welcome all to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast. If you like going off-roading in Toyotas, wrenching on Toyotas, camping in Toyotas, and maybe even poking a little bit of fun at Toyotas, and of course, hearing about how fantastic one-ton axle bits are in Toyotas, then this is the podcast for you. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tyler Lauerson, and joining me is Mr. Jimmy Jet. How are you, Jimmy Jet?
I'm good. I'm tired of freaking potential spam calls.
It could be real spam calls. Would you rather that?
Well, my phone says they're all potential, so I just hang up on
There you go.
So if you're calling me and you could be a potentially spam, just send me a text.
So I actually had to change my voicemail. It says
mine says
pretty much the
same. Yeah. I don't ever check voicemails. Text me.
Yeah.
Is what mine says.
I've pretty much stopped answering phone calls. If I'm not answering, just text me. So
I've realized that I've called you the last 2 days. You've never answered.
Those I've actually been like on the phone with somebody while you've been calling each time.
You're like,
that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Jimmy, I don't want to talk to him.
No, my phone actually doesn't even ring anymore with potential spam calls. I just get a notification in my notification windows that says, this number called you and we think it's potential spam, so we blocked it for you. And I was like, thank you.
Nice. Mine doesn't ring anymore, but I have the whole phone on silent. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Welcome.
Sorry. I distracted you from...
Yes, I forgot what we were doing.
Hi, people. Welcome to an off-roading podcast show where we talk about cell phone calls.
Yeah, spam cell phone calls. Well, we did air the car whatever maintenance thing
true.
Last episode. So
the car insurance.
Yeah. No, this is gonna be a fun one. It's a Monday episode. Happy Monday to everybody.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep. This last weekend was I don't know, fun and exciting, but we'll talk about it on Thursday. And for now, for you guys today, hopefully everybody else enjoyed their weekends, and we're going to talk about some other fun stuff today.
Oh yeah. We've got one random topic for you.
It's a pretty random assortment of interesting things, ideas
there
here.
You go.
But we'll get into that in a little bit. We need to remind everybody first that we have a giveaway going on.
Yes, we do.
If this is the first time listening to the podcast, don't go back and listen to any of the other ones. Well, there's a couple good episodes in there now. So, but you can go back and like cherry pick, do whatever you want. But the cool thing that we do about this podcast is we do a monthly giveaway here at Snail Trail 4x4. We always try and make sure it's at least $100. And it seems like the past, like almost every month this year, we've been well exceeding that. This might be actually one of the lower valued months this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've had up into the thousands, $1,000, $1,300 or something like that.
In a single item. Mm-hmm.
With a single item, or 2 times we've been over $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of the time we've been, a few $100s. And I think we're at $350 plus some with this one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we've got a few items for you from Gear Wrench Corey's Storage Locker Giveaway Extravaganza.
Mm-hmm.
We've got an electronic torque wrench. We've got a light, a tape measure, an 11-in-1 screwdriver, a crescent wrench with snips, a light up LED adjustable wrench, a
Puerto Rican socket set.
Yeah, that too. Same thing. A clutch driven 1/4-inch drive adapter, and then a few random miscellaneous tools thrown in the bag as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, no bag, but thrown in the packaging,
the box,
shipping,
whatever we send it in.
Yeah. Exactly.
It may show up in a Zorb.
We could have probably taken one of the bags from the locker also if we would have thought that far ahead.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, we got a nice kind of random allotment of tools here for the month of September for the giveaway. We've gone over them enough, so we're not going to go into too much detail here today on them. If you want to get in for the giveaway, head over to irate4x4.com. And then you got to create an account, which is free on the forum board. A lot of really cool topics going on in the forum, including the one we're going to talk about today. All you got to do is go down to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast forum, YouTube and podcast forum there. Go into that forum, and then on the right-hand side will be all your payment options. So how to get signed up for the monthly giveaway. If you just want to get signed up for The $5 tier, which is kind of access to the SnailSquad forum or the trail, the treasure hunt token 6 months in advance of everybody else. The Facebook page, some fun things you get with that $5 a month. You can go do that there. The $10 a month is also available there. And $20 a month, which is the gift box tier.
Yeah, which is opening up in like a week and a half or something like that.
Yeah, coming up here shortly. Keep an eye on that. Just a reminder, this will be the first time the gift box tier has been open since we've switched over to iRate 4x4, which is kind of a PayPal-based system, right? So I know that there's been some people waiting over on Patreon to cancel their Patreon because they missed it last April, to cancel their Patreon so that they maintain staying in the gift box tier. So October is going to be your month to do that, from October 1st to October 31st. That's going to be your deadline. If there's anybody that's looking to bump up in tier from the $5 tier or the giveaway tier into the gift box tier during October, you need to remember to cancel your other tier. Just bumping up tiers will not automatically cancel the lower tier.
Correct.
So keep that in mind as we get into October here, if people are looking to either upgrade or get into the gift box tier or finally make that move over from Patreon.
Also, I guess we should do a PSA of make sure that your addresses are correct on, I guess it would be PayPal now, because if your address is not correct on PayPal, then we're going to be sending your box to another person's address. Another address.
Yep. So yeah, please go through into your PayPals and make sure your addresses, your shipping addresses are correct in PayPal. All right. So that's gift boxes coming up and kind of the open month.
Yeah. In regards to gift boxes, I think on Thursday we'll do a little update on how we might be changing the gift box tier here for the next session. And we'll dive more into detail with that. But as of right now, it doesn't sound like it's going to change immensely. But we'll talk about that more on Thursday so that we can go in depth on it, because we have kind of a lengthy discussion today.
Yep.
So
a little bit of lengthy discussion.
So pay attention to Thursday episode for that. Also, once again, I want to remind you guys that there's the question form for episode 350 down below in the show description. So you can write in your questions there, and we will answer them on episode 350 with the assistant and secretary.
Cool. I like it. Yep. I wanted to make sure that's known as well. So episode 350 is coming up, and it won't be any fun. I mean, it'll probably be fun if we're just sitting around talking, but I think it could be a lot more fun if we have some interaction from you guys. Absolutely. And getting some questions in that I think could make things interesting.
Yeah. Well, every time we ask to have the assistant and secretary on, they always go, okay, what are we going to talk about?
and then we'll say camping, and then that's not even good enough to figure out what we're talking about.
Then we end up talking about two different things, apparently. Right. So, this time we sort of have a game plan where we've already let them know what's going to happen. But if we don't get any questions, I think they're going to be upset with us.
They're going to be upset with you guys, not us.
True.
That's not on us.
It's not on that. Yeah. So they're going to be upset with you out there.
Yes.
So it's, they can't be upset with us. We did our job.
Yep.
It's just, you didn't write a question in.
Yep. And by you, we're all pointing fingers at Sherpa. So.
I got a message from that guy the other day.
I did too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not looking forward to it. So
anytime he comes into town, I get worried.
We'll see if he makes it out of his driveway without both of his wheels falling off.
Yeah, that would be good.
Oh, man. Love you, buddy.
YJ life.
So anyways, I think that about does it for housekeeping stuff. Did we get through it all?
I think so.
Cool.
Maybe we should just run down real quick that we do have a few discount codes down in our show notes for some of the businesses that do support us, like Gear Wrench, but they don't have a discount code now that I'm thinking about it. But they do support us, like our giveaway that we have this month. We've got Mob Armor down there. We have Iron Man 4x4. We have Sharks Surplus.
Sidetracked Off-Road.
Is Spartan Ropes down there? They've been good to us, but yeah. Okay.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know if the discount code he gave us was just for the month that we had, or if it was a permanent one. I'll check back in with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had and possibly still have a Freedom Ropes discount going
Probably.
on.
Yeah.
So, which is another great American company. So, yeah, if you are looking for parts or items for the off-roading industry, go check out our discount codes.
Awesome. I like it. Support those guys. That's how, and when you support them, shout out to Jacob Gleghorn.
Oh yeah. What did he do now?
We over at the Glue Tread website onto the 4x4 kit, the first review that's at the top of the reviews is from Jacob Gleghorn. He goes, heard about this from the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast.
Nice.
I thought it was an awesome episode, and this is exactly what I've been looking for. So thank you. And so when you guys do that, like that word, just that one review goes a very long ways to ensure that these vendors keep working with us and working with you guys as well to provide discount codes and provide a good service to the good products that they have. And so,
yeah, absolutely. Anyways, that any name dropping that you do or using the discount code shows that, you know, that you came from us and are going to them. So it shows that we're doing our job correctly.
Yep. Exactly.
And, and as business owners on our end, right? Snail Arm and Morphlate, we track discount codes as well. And it, you know, I've personally had somebody ask for more additional free product, and I've turned to their discount code and said, your discount code's only been used once. Yeah. Like, you know, bluntly speaking, why should I give you more free product when you've only, you know, influenced one person? Yeah. You know, so these things do come around, and, you know, being able to track discount codes don't think of it as a stealing money from the company. Think of it as you're helping those companies and showing where the influence is coming from. Yeah, 100%. It's been really neat. Do you know Casey Liddell? Who Casey Liddell is? No. He's a pretty sizable YouTube channel now. Okay. Called Cascade Heavy Rescue, and Casey Liddell's channel. But he does a bunch of recovery work up in the Pacific Northwest. Okay. And I met him out at Overland Expo, Oregon, PNW. Okay. He was walking around with Nate. And so Nate introduced us. And talking with Casey, we immediately hit it off because I'm a recovery nerd. Sure. And that's kind of what his channel is based around, is recoveries. He's kind of like Matt's Off-Road Recovery, but in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. And less advertising. But he's a really interesting character. But what was really cool was we worked with him on some Morphlate product with not really like any expectation. I never told him like, hey, yeah, I'm expecting you to do an episode on this or show it on your YouTube channel. I just want you to use it. And if you like it, tell people about it. If not, tell people about it. Like, tell people what your honest review and feedback is. If it's a shitty product, it's a shitty product. And that's on me to fix, right? Sure. Yeah. And he ended up mentioning it a couple times in a couple episodes, and his viewers and listeners are amazing at coming and saying that they found Morphlate because of Casey. Oh, cool. And so just kind of like coattailing on what you said about being a business owner, and that stuff does run a big impact to those that are making the business decisions at these different vendors and places that work with the podcast. Yeah. To give really cool benefits to the listeners. So, right. And now it also gives you motivation to go back and work with Casey in another direction. Exactly. Because his listeners are supporting him and supporting you. Yep, exactly. So it's a really cool kind of three-way symbiotic relationship. Yeah. It's what are those called? Threesomes? No, not a threesome. That's like a one-night stand kind of thing. Polyamorous relationship. There we go. Sure. Yeah. We're really down the rabbit hole now. Yes, we are. No, and so just stuff like that. That just, when you have a win-win-win thing going like that and everybody's happy about it, that's where the cool stuff happens. Absolutely. So the more we can keep cool stuff happening for the channel here, for everybody and all the listeners, the more the channel just grows and continues. So, yep. 100%. Yep. Cool, man. So speaking of growing and continuing. Yes. I need to grow to some bigger axles. Oh. Is that today's main topic? I think that is today's main topic. All right. So I have a general direction and I'm heading that way.
So let's head that direction after the break here, shall we?
All right. Sounds good to me.
All right, man. Everybody grab your favorite drinks, your favorite Skittles, and we'll be right on back with today's campfire discussion.
Wait, why are you walking that
Oh, welcome back, ladies, gentle ladies, everybody else out there. If any of the kiddos are listening, we have one of my favorite topics because we're bringing back the Axle Talk podcast, man.
Woo!
Yay!
Yeah, studio audience is excited.
I don't know what it is about axles. Like, I honestly don't understand why I'm fascinated with axles. I don't get it.
I don't know either.
I don't know why. I don't know the reasoning behind it. All I know is that I really, really enjoy axles.
Okay.
And so I like learning how they work. I like learning the different types out there, the different engineering that goes into them. You know, what sets this axle apart from this axle? Are OEM axles better than aftermarket custom built axles? There's a lot of different stuff that goes into them. I don't know why it is that I like that. That's like one of the most enjoyable parts of a vehicle to me, but it is.
Got it. Okay. That's interesting.
So by going down this rabbit hole of, you know, Kermit, we've talked about it. I cracked the frame pretty bad.
In multiple spots. Not all at once either, probably.
Yeah, probably not all at once. The two around the spring hangers and like the radiator support area, the front cross member, those look fairly old. The one next to the air conditioning pulley on the frame there, that looks brand spanking fresh and new. It's all nice and bright silver.
Oh, interesting. So that's probably the one that was making the noise.
I'm guessing that's the one that was making the noise down the trail as we were coming off Rubicon. But yeah, so I started down this rabbit hole of, I wanted to build up the rig, right?
Yeah. What I want to know is, I mean, you wanted to build up your rig and you wanted to get, you know, wider stance because you hate off camber, but somehow you landed on the Tundra third members.
Yes.
And then you got that stuck in your head.
It's totally stuck in my head. 100%.
How did that come about?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I think you know what it was? We were out on Fordyce up at the top of Winch Hill 3. I think you were there. I don't know if you were there. There was a third gen 4Runner that came up, Winch Hill 3, just the center section. And he was running a Tundra rear axle, the 10.5 inch rear axle, and then an FJ80 custom front axle.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
With the 8-inch high pinion. And I had known that the Tundra rear axles are beefy, but I had never really considered it for an off-roading vehicle. There's a couple of really, really big major flaws, in my opinion, with that axle for off-roading. A, 5 lug. B, semi-float.
Correct.
And so it's like, if you're going up to a Dana 70 equivalent axle, why keep it semi-float?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I don't see any point into it. So, once I saw that guy actually using a Tundra axle for off-roading, I was like, that kind of caught my attention. I think that's where it all spiraled off of.
Okay.
And that was what, 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
3 years ago?
Yeah, at least 2 years ago.
I don't know how much it was. Yeah. Anyways, so ever since then, I started looking into it more. And I was like, man, I wonder if there's a way to convert these axles to a full float and then run some custom shafts or something and get an 8 or a 6 lug or at the time I was considering the 6x5.5, the Toyota lug pattern, right? For mini trucks, 4Runners, blah, blah. And so I was like, man, I wish there was a way to do that. And I started looking, I was like, it's just not worth it. The housing is a beefy housing. It's what is it? 1/4 inch stamped steel housing?
Is it really?
I think so. They're beefy housings.
Yes. I know they're heavy.
But semi-float and 5 lug.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at that third member, and I got
5 lug's not bad.
It's not
just
bad.
Part of the problem would be that you would have different wheels.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to get a different wheel set for just the rear, unless you change to something that's 5 lug in the front.
Mm-hmm. And those wheels are not super common, right? So if I do have an issue, it may be a while before I get a replacement wheel.
Yeah, and actually that's when I was doing the Tundra install with the Ironman 4x4 foam cell kit. He had wheels on order, but he had to wait for them for a while to come in because they don't make them very often. That bolt pattern is not common. So, and then the 3rd gen Tundras are 6 lug again.
Yep. And so looking at all of the kind of the downsides of that axle, but the plus side of that axle is it has a fucking beefy center section.
Yes.
The carrier, the third member, everything about it is pure beef. And
it's a 10.5 inch dropout third.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So it's almost equivalent to a 10.5 inch Sterling axle, which is what they put under F250s, F350s, F450s. I don't know about the 550s though. I think once you get up in
450s.
The 450s, really? Yeah, I'm not sure what they have under 450s actually.
They might have bigger.
Yeah. But anyway,
Rockwells.
Right. So I'm looking at this third member and I'm like, that's a 10.5 inch dropout. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To have a Dana 70 equivalent center section in a dropout design, that's pretty freaking cool. And I was like, then I started thinking, well, if it's in a dropout design, I can use that and just put it into a custom housing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I can have whatever lug pattern I want.
Yeah.
And full float and all this other stuff.
Sure.
So I'm like,
so you went from the rear axle forward.
I did. I'd never thought about doing it as a forward axle, as a steer axle. I was just like, that would be pretty fucking awesome, badass to build a custom rear axle using a Tundra 10.5 inch dropout third member, and put full float on the ends. And, originally I was looking at, putting spindles on there, Dana 60 spindles on the ends and doing kind of Dana 60 outers and spindles on the end of the rear axle and all this other stuff. And the front axle, I was looking at just doing kind of like an FJ80 setup, but I wanted it to be wider.
Yeah.
I wanted it to match the width of a full width, like 72 inch WMS, not a 67 inch full width, a 72. Because, like you said, I'm tall. I don't like being off camber. I've got a lot of unsprung weight on the vehicle. And it works great the way it is now, but there's a lot of situations where I'm like, I'm starting to do more stuff and venture outside of just what we have in the Sierras here. Right.
Sure. Right.
And so I want to make it more universally wheelable in different types of wheeling situations. So I want to be wider. I want to be not just wider, I want to be a lot wider.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was like, because I don't necessarily want to lose my ground clearance. I love the ground clearance I have right now for the Sierras and what we have in the Sierras. Absolutely love how tall I am now. I don't think I'd want to go any taller, but I don't think I really want to go any shorter either. I like where I'm at now, but I'm definitely too tall for stuff like some of the more extreme stuff in Johnson Valley or Moab or Trail Hero, Hurricane area, Sand Hollow. So I'm like, I want to be wider. That way I can gain more stability, but keep my ground clearance for 90% of the wheeling I do here in the Sierras. So I was like, okay, let's do that. So that means I would need to take a front FJ80 axle and make it even wider. Which is essentially what my dad has on his truck. His front truck is equivalent of an FJ80, but a 72 inch WMS.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's kind of the way I was leaning for a while. And then
doesn't he have mini truck outer?
He does.
Burfields?
Yep.
Okay.
He has an 8-inch high pinion though.
Yeah.
So I guess the center section is FJ80, and then he's got a full width on the WMS and then mini truck outers.
Right.
In diamond axles housing. So, I was like, I kind of like that route. I like that. Then I was like, well, what would be better? A 9.5-inch low pinion in the front or an 8-inch high pinion in the front?
Yeah.
8-inch gets you more ground clearance.
You're pushing on the correct side of the gears.
You're pushing on the correct side of the gears. But in a 9.5-inch third member is a lot stronger and beefier than an 8-inch. You get a lot less deflection. But I'm not going high speeds. I'm not, shock loading my drivetrain a ton. So I don't think deflection is something I need to personally worry about. So I was like, I think I'm going to go the 8-inch high pinion route. And then Hussman got in all of his axle stuff. And then I learned about unit bearings and how unit bearings work, how they're set up, and really the ease of swapping out unit bearings on trails if you do have any issues. I like Toyota knuckle designs. I like that enclosed knuckle design. They're plenty strong. The main issue with them that I have, tear them apart at home, not a big concern. If you have to tear apart a Toyota knuckle on the trail, there's just a lot of little stuff that goes in there.
Yeah.
You have to have them all in the right order. There's a lot of things that have to be torqued a very specific way and then torqued and untorqued, put back on.
And it's dirty.
There's tons of grease everywhere in those things. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with that out on a trail anymore.
Yeah.
And granted, I've never had to take apart my knuckles on a trail before, but I'm like, I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so
I don't blame you.
I was like, looking at unit bearing designs, I was like, this is the way to go for trail spares and setting up trail repairs. Unit bearings are super nice.
So what is a unit bearing in, the book of dummies or explained by dummies?
Like I'm 5.
Yeah.
ELI 5.
Yeah, exactly. What is a unit bearing? How does it work?
So a unit bearing encompasses your wheel mount surface. So what your wheel attaches to in order to get drive off of your axle shaft. It encompasses that. It encompasses your rotor mounting. So how does your rotor mount to that part as well? It encompasses your wheel bearings and your spindle that the axle shaft goes through that supports the wheel bearings and everything, right?
Okay.
So it's got these 4 components, and I don't know enough about unit bearings to say if there's more components in there than that, but that's kind of the general gist, right?
It's this one unit that covers holding your brake system on to some extent.
Holding the rotor on. Attaching to the axle and attaching the wheel. And then there was something else. And the wheel bearings and spindle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all kind of built into this one unit, a unit bearing.
Okay.
And so the way that then attaches is you bolt it to your knuckle with 4 bolts. And if, something goes bad in your unit bearing, either the spindle gives out or the bearings wear out, you have a bearing blowout on you, or I don't know, you break a stud off, whatever it is. You just unbolt the 4 bolts that hold the unit bearing to your knuckle and you put a new unit bearing on.
Right.
And there's no grease. Everything's pre-greased. It's all enclosed bearings pretty much. You don't have to really oil stuff. The maintenance is really low on them. The only downside to unit bearings is they're expensive because you're taking all these different components and putting them into one unit.
Got it.
And so if you need to replace one, they're like $500 per corner, whatever you do.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's a pretty nice way to go for off-roading. And the more I looked into it, I was like, I wonder if there's a way to put unit bearings on, FJ80 axle. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, if I'm doing that, then if I have to do unit bearings, I have to convert from the Toyota 30 spline to a Dana 60 35 spline minimum on the outers. There's no point in running that Toyota inner spline anymore, right?
Yeah, especially on the FJ80 ones because they're pretty thin.
the FJ80 inner shafts are the same diameter as a Toyota mini truck shaft.
Yep.
So
pretty thin
compared to a inch and a half Dana 60 or Dana 70 35 spline. So I'm like, well, okay, that means I don't want my inner shaft to be the wink link in the system here.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have to dig all the way in there, right? And
where do you want your fuse?
Exactly. Where do you want your fuse? So I'm like, all right, so now I have to beef up the inner shafts, which means I need to run a bigger carrier differential. And so I started looking at going back to the Land Cruiser 9.5 inch. And I'm like, that's still not, I mean, I think it's a little bit bigger shaft, but not much. It's not, and still that would be my weak link, the inner shaft still.
I think it's the same size shaft, just different spline count.
Really? As the Toyota mini trucks and the front axle shafts?
I believe so.
That wouldn't surprise me. I know that the pinions are a lot bigger on the 9.5 inch, but yeah, I'm not sure about the shafts themselves, the axle shafts. So I'm like, I need something equivalent to a 35 spline on the inners, which means now I'm relegated to just running a Super Duty axle up front, F250 Super Duty with a 9-inch high pinion, or I could go kind of the same route Hussman went and go with a Spider Track setup with, a TubeWorks or a Gearworks or a Spider Tracks dropout 9-inch.
Yeah. Or high 9.
Or high 9, something like that. So I'm like, all right, so now we're looking at, $4,000 to $5,000 for a differential. And I'm like, it's a beefy differential. They're phenomenal diffs. You can use them in a lot of different applications. That's what almost every Ultra 4 racer out there is using.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what a lot of the Rock Bounce is using. A lot of them are also using 14 bolts front and rear, like Jason Green's buggy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to do just an F250 axle. It's been done. That's boring. I could do it. It would be strong. I would never break it. But it's boring.
Okay.
I was like,
Tyler doesn't like to be bored.
I don't like to be bored, man. I want to learn a bunch of stuff in the process too, right? I want to learn building it myself. I want to learn how an axle, all the different components of an axle go together to create this really awesome piece of machinery and engineering on a vehicle.
Okay.
So I'm like, I don't want to just take an F250, throw it in there with a WFO kit and call it good in a weekend. I'm like, that's no fun to me.
Right.
So I'm like, how can I make this more fun and enticing? One way is going by the same way Hussman did. And really, I started going down that route after talking to Brian Ellinger over at Diamond. He kind of talked me out of the Toyota platform and into the wonderful world of 9-inch.
Yeah.
And he goes, once you're in 9-inch territory, you can do whatever you want. The aftermarket support for 9-inch differentials, it's endless. You can do anything you want.
Yeah. Yeah. They've got so many different varieties of 9 inches that it's insane. Yep. I mean, you're talking like, you were complaining that you couldn't get a wheel for a 5-lug, but it would it would be the equivalent kind of to going to maybe a Toyota lug pattern or, a Chevy or Dodge or Ford lug pattern on a 17-inch wheel, because you could get any tire you want on the market, because almost every tire on the market will make something for a 17.
Yep.
But if you're like me and have 16.5s on Clifford, there's not a whole lot of tire options for a 16.5 inch wheel. So so going from a Toyota platform to the 9-inch platform, it opens up a bunch of doors.
There's a lot of different options available. And I'm like, options, I like options. Because that's where fun starts happening. You get to start picking and choosing all these different things and build something just the way you want to build it, right?
The problem is there's too many options.
But then the problem is there's too many options. Yes. But what really killed it for me was that there's no e-lockers for 9-inch.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There's no e-lockers for 9-inch. And that was another thing going through all this. I'm sick of dealing with my ARBs. And it's not that, I mean, it might be the airlines. Maybe I just don't know how to properly vent an ARB airline. I'm like, I don't know. You just leave the freaking thing open up high so shit doesn't get in it. But
You need one of those little filters.
Man, I don't know what it is, but I have gear oil constantly dumping out of my ARB solenoids. And I don't know if the seals keep blowing on the ARBs, why it's happening. Because to me, I'm like, the seal housing and the gaskets on an ARB should not allow gear oil into the air system of an ARB.
Yeah, should not.
But it's happening. But I would think that if it was happening, that means the seal would blow and the lockers wouldn't actuate because the air would escape out the seals into the axle. But that's not happening either.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I don't know why. My lockers work. They function. I can lock them up whenever I want at a moment's notice. They lock up immediately every single time. There's no binding with them. They unlock almost as immediately. But they get your gear oil everywhere, and I'm just sick and tired of it. That and you know, ARBs, say what you want about them. They're a good, strong design. They're a proven design. But it's still a more complex system
than
a spool, right? Or welding or anything. So I'm like, I want to get rid of some of the complexity. If, I don't have to depend on, an air compressor to stay working as well, or an air bottle to stay filled in order to run my lockers,
or lines to not get pinched or cracked or broken.
Or heated up and broken or whatever it is. Like, I take that back. I have had one issue with it. I blew an airline once, but I routed it right next to my exhaust. And after that, I haven't had issues. So, I mean, I haven't really had issues with airlines, and I don't know. It just seems like an ARB locker setup is more complex than pretty much any other option out there for locking up a differential, right?
Yeah, probably.
But they don't make e-lockers for 9-inch, and I want to have a selectable locker, because I drive around on the roads a lot and I don't want to wear out my tires fast. I already wear my tires out quick enough.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to wear them out quicker. And so I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm relegated to ARBs then. If I want to go down this route of 9-inch, get in the wonderful world of 9-inch. And so I had kind of in my head decided, let's just do ARBs.
Yep. Headed back to ARBs.
Yep. Go back to ARBs. We'll set up 9-inch third members front and rear. And then I'll run, I don't know, a trail gear housing, a rough stuff housing, a diamond housing, whatever it is. And be able to still have the 10.5-inch Tundra third member in the rear on that axle. And then I'll run a 9-inch up front with a high pinion. And then somewhere along the way, somebody was like, you should build a steer axle Dana 60. I think it was Kevin Poole. And he said that it's not that bad to do. You just have to cut the tubes out and swap, because I'd have to then also make it a passenger drop.
Right.
So I'd have to move the differential over from driver drop to passenger drop, cut the tubes. And then once I'm cutting the tubes out and kind of rearranging the center section, it wouldn't be that hard to cut the knuckles off too and just put new knuckles on and make it a steer axle or something. And I'm like, that sounds kind of fun. Like, I would love to do that. I just don't know if I have the time to do it.
I'm pretty sure there are passenger side drop 60s.
There are, but they're getting really hard to find. It's late 70s Chevy Kingpins.
Yeah.
Are passenger drop. So it's like, they're just getting really hard to find nowadays. And so you can easily, much easier and sometimes cheaper, just find an F250 axle, pull the tubes out, flop them around, and then put whatever outers you want on them. I'm like, that's appealing to me, because it would be a really fun project. I'd get to play around with the knuckles, cutting the knuckles off, moving everything around. I was like, I just don't know if I have time. And then for some reason, I don't know what it was. I think it might've been while watching Hussman build his axles, his Spider-Trax axles, and being able to have a custom housing that's full steel that you can just weld to anywhere you want. I was like, that's appealing to me. I don't want to have to worry about properly preheating a center cast section or properly preheating cast knuckles to weld stuff to them. If I can find something that, mainly because my welding skills aren't good enough.
Okay.
And so if we can find something that's easier to weld to, and I can weld anywhere I want, I think I'd rather go that route.
Yep.
And so that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm just going down the 9-inch realm with a custom axle. And then I was like, well, shit. And then I started looking into all the different outers for everything for 9-inch outers. And I was like, and I don't know where the conversation came up, but somebody, you might have been you.
Maybe.
Probably was you, where you said, can you imagine if you took that Tundra third member and put one in the front as well? That way you're running the same differential front and rear. And I was like, yeah, but then I would have to like build everything and build a custom. You're like, you're already looking at doing that with the 9-inch. Why not just do it and run with a 10.5 instead of a 9? That way we have the same third member front and rear. And I was like, oh, that would be cool. And I think that's what finally solidified me on staying with that Tundra third member. And running it front and rear.
Yeah.
So then
what's interesting about the Tundra though is, and at the time, ARBs were your only option. So you were going back to the only selectable locker option for me is ARBs. And I think you were comfortable with that because you just came from the 9-inch.
I had already kind of had it set in my head that I was just gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then when we went to Moab this year, Dimitri said that Eaton, within the past 2 years, I don't know when they did, Eaton released the their E-Locker for Tundra 10.5-inch third members.
Yep.
I was like, no fucking way. Are you serious?
Yeah. Ryan said that they ordered a few of them up and threw them in there into some rigs.
Yep. They've thrown them in a couple Tundras now. And, talking with a bunch of other people, really Brian over at Diamond, like I said, he was the one that sold me on just staying with ARBs, mainly because E-Lockers are notorious for not being able to actuate quickly, unactuate quickly.
Okay.
They tend to get bound up easily. And so when the actuator of the E-Locker gets bound up, it doesn't want to unlock and therefore give you better turning on the trail, quote unquote.
Sure.
That's really the benefit of, if you're on a trail, turning off your lockers so you can get better turning radiuses, right? And I was talking.
I guess. I don't know.
I mean,
I've never had selectables.
No, but yeah, I guess that's true.
I have a spool in the rear and Detroit in the front. And for the longest time, I was Detroit and Detroit. So I've never had that option or noticed a difference, really. But I haven't had the opportunity to try to notice a difference. So.
Yeah. And then I had some conversations with Hussman and then Dimitri out at Moab, and Hussman at some other times, about when I'm running a trail with my ARBs, I turn it on and off my lockers all the time.
Yeah, you do.
And I started thinking about it. And when I came up Soup Bowl for the first time, I got to the top of Soup Bowl and turned off my lockers before I'd cleared the FU rock. And watching the video of that was really enlightening to me because Hussman has always said, when you're on a trail, keep everything locked up. It's so much easier on components, unless you're running an IFS vehicle.
Right.
But he goes, it's so much easier on your drivetrain. You're not shock loading your drivetrain. Things aren't slipping and then grabbing all of a sudden. You're just always engaged 4-wheel drive all the time. And then watching me come up that FU rock at the top of Soup Bowl, being unlocked in the front, I was trying to climb a rock on my passenger side and it wasn't climbing. It was just kind of binding up there as the passenger kept turning. And that's what was pushing me up and over and making me feel like I was going to tip over at the top of Soup Bowl. And so watching that, I was like, all of a sudden, I don't know why, it just all of a sudden what Hussman had been saying all these times clicked and the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's what he meant. If everything's turning, you don't, and you always have 4-wheel drive all the time. You're always in control. You've always got traction moving. it's a lot safer on the trail for you and all of your drivetrain components.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so now, after realizing that, and then after talking with Dimitri out at Moab, he goes, once you're on a trail, you just lock up the rear locker anyways. You're never disengaging it pretty much. And I was like, I disengage mine all the time. And he goes, you should try wheeling around sometime with just your rear locker engaged 24/7 on a trail and see if you notice a difference. So in Moab, I started doing that, and I've been doing it now to this day. And I'm like, I can't tell the difference, really.
No.
I mean, I can hear my inside tire spinning, burning out when I turn sharply, but like I haven't noticed a decrease in turning radius because my rear end is locked.
Right. But have you noticed that you're not stopping as often to
Yes.
engage lockers so that you can get up an obstacle?
No, because with ARBs, they have no troubles engaging, right? You can engage them in the middle of wheel spin and they engage just fine.
Okay.
But I did notice that with my rear end locked all the time, the trail is a lot easier. I have a lot less time when like I do stop on an obstacle because I stop forward momentum. I've stopped going anywhere because I'm now in 2-wheel drive
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, so with e-lockers, I'm okay with running an e-locker. That and I have hydro assist. And so I haven't noticed a big difference. I mean, you get a better turning radius when you're not, but like you just futz around. That's something I'm willing to live with an e-locker, of getting it engaging and disengaging in the middle of tight turns on a trail.
I'd be interested to try that. I'd be like to do a test, like find a big open dirt field and have you locked in the rear, open in the front, drive
in a circle,
360 degrees.
full lock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have full lock. And then lock the front locker and then and locked in the rear and drive
and do it again
and do 360 degrees. And then maybe lock the front, unlock the rear and see what happens.
and open.
Open.
Yeah.
And see if what the difference is.
Yeah.
How much of a difference is it? Like, are we speaking, like feet difference or are we speaking an inch difference?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's kind of something I would want to know too. I have noticed with my front locker on, I'm not able to turn quite as tightly, but I haven't noticed a difference between being open and having just the rear locked. It seems to be the same either way in that scenario.
Yeah. I know I can turn passenger tighter than I can turn driver.
Oh yeah. Is that because your tie rod and drag link hit each other?
Probably.
Yeah.
It's not because my lockers.
No. Yeah. So, I'm like, all right, but if I can run a trail and keep my rear locker engaged just the whole time, then who gives a shit about it disengaging or having trouble disengaging? That becomes a non-issue with e-lockers.
Yeah.
The front locker might be an issue, but like I've also kind of been playing with that and just turning on my front ARBs on trails at different times to see if I'm going to climb a ledge and have to make a slight turn, or I'm making a hill climb and a slight turn, is it really making that much of a difference on the steering? And I haven't noticed it. It's just when you're taking a really tight hairpin in the trail, and I can't think of very many tight hairpins with that you wouldn't be able to steer through if you need a locker. Because typically if you need a locker, that means you're getting really articulated. If you're getting really articulated, typically a lot of pressure comes off one tire or the other, which allows you to turn.
Yeah.
So,
or not turn.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, I think an e-locker in the front is going to work just fine. All of Jeep's Wranglers since 2007, JKs have had e-lockers in the front in the Rubicon models, and they do just fine. There's not really, the big issue with them is that they're not hydro assist. So people don't run the front locker as much because they can't turn without hydro assist. But once you put hydro assist on, it's like, who gives a shit? So I'm kind of like,
steers almost like normal.
Yeah. So anyways, now that I've
better,
in
some cases,
now that I've learned that the Eaton came out with the e-locker for the 10.5-inch third members, I'm like, sweet. This is like coming together now.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got You're going to use fabricated housings because you can weld to them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to use you're ending up with using the Tundra 10.5-inch third members, front and rear, with Eaton lockers and probably 529s.
Yep.
Is there high options for higher gears?
No, it's the deepest gear you can get into is 529s with the Tundra. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then in the rear, you're going full float.
Yep.
And disc brakes probably. And then it just mounts on there like with a unit bearing, right?
Yep. Unit bearing mounting. And so now here comes the stuff that I've learned since Rubathon.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the other part of that was while talking to Will Wood at King of the Hammers this year, I learned about their electric parking brake.
Yes.
And I was like, that's the way I'm going with a parking brake.
Yep.
And so that'll be super nice. I learned some more things about the parking brake in the sense that it does not draw power when the vehicle's not on. It only draws power while it's actuating and unactuating the parking brake.
Disactuation.
Is
that a word?
Question mark? I don't know. And so, yeah, it's essentially I think it's a worm drive gear, some kind of gear in there. And there's an electric motor. So when you hit electricity to the parking brake, it actuates, turns on the motor to drive a gear, which pushes the brake cylinder the caliper cylinder in to 2,500 PSI. Pounds per square inch is what it pushes at.
Wow.
And then once it's in, it
stops.
locks in place.
Okay.
So the motor isn't continually like drawing power while the brake is engaged or disengaged.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it doesn't draw power again until you deactivate it and turn it and make it loosen. Then it runs the worm drive and reverse and it loosens the pads and then it turns off and you're not using power anymore.
Yep.
That's cool.
And the nice thing about the electric parking brakes is you don't have to worry about getting a mechanical cable set up just right to pull on and engage a parking brake caliper. You just run 18 gauge wire, two 18 gauge wires, a ground. I think it's just run off a switch. So you run them out to a switch and then out to power, and you get to make that however long you want to route it however you want to in your vehicle.
Right. That's cool.
So
yeah. And then somehow get a mounting plate for it.
Yeah. You're going to have to make your own bracket. I think I'm gonna have to make their own bracket on it. But, so I learned that out of King Hammers this year. So I'm like, electric parking brake. I want that set up on these axles too. And so I was like, now I'm just kind of stuck on what I want for the outers. And I thought that the way I was going to go was going to be running 35 spline outers on U-joints because I wanted to run the Spider Trax knuckles.
Okay.
I really like the Spider Trax knuckle design. It's really strong. It looks really good. You can get up to 50 degrees of steering out of it. So I can, I'm not going to get that much. But I'll limit the steering, but it means I'm also not limited on what I can build the steering to based on the knuckles. I'm limited based on how much space my tires take up when they turn.
Yeah. How close your tire gets to your frame.
Exactly. And so I'm like, I like the uniball design of the Spider Trax knuckles. The downside to the Spider Trax knuckles is that they have to use the 99-04 Ford Super Duty unit bearings, which have a big design flaw to them, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yep. The 99-04 Super Duty unit bearings, and this I just learned within the past 2 weeks too. I had talked with Parts Mike. We talked a little bit about it, and he was like, when I took my drive shaft down, I was having my drive shaft rebuilt and put the double cardan on. Talked with Mike, and he's built quite a few pretty badass axles in his times. He knows a lot about parts, and he said, you're making a really, really badass axle, but you're destroying and ruining the axle by putting 99-04 unit bearings in. And
why is that?
Because of the flaw of them. What happens, I guess, is the spindle rides on the bearings, or the bearings ride on the spindle weird for that unit bearing. And it doesn't ride evenly or correctly for some reason. And what happens is the spindle heats up and expands and blows out your bearings over time.
And this is if you're doing higher speeds.
This is highway driving, freeway driving, higher speeds, any stress on it. Yeah. Maybe for
people that are just like, trailered rock crawler, it's not going to be an issue. But
may not be an issue.
You're going on the road at freeway speeds for driving to Mexico, it wouldn't be the best thing to have.
Yeah. And so I called Spider Tracks and I was like, why do you guys are the best in the industry. Why do you guys use the 99-04 unit bearings then for your knuckles and on everything? He goes, well, we start with that design, but what we do is we replace the spindle with a chromoly heat-treated spindle and a chromoly heat-treated stub nose. I don't know what a stub nose is, but they take and they don't use the 99-04 design. They take all the 99-04 unit bearings and replace parts in them so that it gets rid of that problem of the spindle expanding and contracting.
Okay.
And so I was like, interesting. So in order to do that though, they have to bore out the unit bearing a little bit more, which means you can't run any kind of selectable hubs that are currently on the market.
Oh.
So any selectable hubs for a 99-04 unit bearing will not work on Spider Tracks unit bearings. And so I was like, well, that kind of sucks. Do you guys make selectable hubs? He goes, no. I was like, have you ever thought about making selectable hubs? He goes, yeah, we've thought about it. We just don't get ever any demand. There's nobody ever asking. Our market is race cars and buggies. They're not looking for selectable hubs.
Sure.
And I was like, do you think that might
makes sense?
I 100% agree. And I was like, yeah, that's not your market. What I'm doing is not your market.
Yeah.
However,
they don't want multiple failure points when you could just have a slug that you throw in.
Exactly. And if they get to design their own slugs, they can control the quality control process a lot better and not do stupid things like I'm doing and run a bunch of different manufacturers' parts all together.
Right.
And to figure out where the failure points are. So I was like, have you guys ever thought about running selectable hubs? He goes, no, not really. And I was like, okay, I guess I can't use your stuff then.
Yeah.
And for a brief second, I thought very seriously about just dealing with having a slug in there and having my front drive shaft spinning all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, Mopar's been doing it forever.
Yeah. A whole bunch of rigs do it.
Yeah. A lot of OEM factories do it. No problem. But then I'm like, I don't really want to have to worry about my front drive shaft. If I smash it on a rock, I don't want to have to care about it.
Yeah.
And I know that the argument to that is, well, if you smash it on a rock, then when you drive home, just pull your front drive shaft. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's that. Definitely I could do that. But like, I don't want to have to add that to another thing I have to maintain and check on the vehicle after I'm done wheeling. So I'm like, I want selectable hubs. I don't want to have to worry about the front drive shaft. I think it'd be easier to have selectable hubs.
Okay. So Spider Tracks is out. So
Spider Tracks is now out, which means I was looking at the Trail Gear 99-04 unit bearings. Trail Gear has some, Yukon has some, and there's a couple other places that have them. Every place I called, though, they run the OEM factory 99-04 unit bearings with no changes made to them. So I'm like, that means all of the 99-04 unit bearings out in the market that fit with a 6x5.5 inch lug pattern, they all have that bearing issue at high speeds. So I'm like, well, I guess the Trail Gear unit bearings are out of the question, which means 6x5.5. If I want selectable hubs, 6x5.5 lug patterns are now out of the question.
Oh, interesting.
So,
because they were the only other manufacturer that did that.
Pretty much Curry makes their own 99-04 unit bearings, but they don't make anything in Toyota patterns, lug patterns.
Of course not.
Nope. So, I was like, for a brief second, I looked over at Curry and I was like, because I've heard that they do the spindle and stub nose swap that Spider Tracks does, but they don't have anything for Toyotas.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, I guess I'm not doing 6x5.5 lug patterns anymore, which means now I've also got to get new wheels in all of this.
Yes.
But now that opens up the wonderful world of O5 and up Super Duty parts.
Yes, that does.
And O5 and up Super Duty parts are a step above the 99 to 04 Super Duty parts in every way. You're looking at axle shafts, you're looking at unit bearings, you're looking at stub shafts, you're looking at U-joint capabilities, you're looking at knuckle designs, everything about 05 to 05 and up Super Duty
to current
parts.
Yeah.
Is a better design almost in every way. So I was like, well, okay, if I give in and say, if I want selectable hubs, I got to go to 8 by 6.5 or 8 on 170 lug patterns. That gives me into 05 and up Super Duty unit bearings. And I was like, those are used on rock bouncers. If rock bouncers are using them, I don't think I'm going to have any issues ever with them. So I'm like, that's not a bad idea to go. The only downside, and it makes parts availabilities more readily available, more quote unquote off the shelf. If I needed to go pick something up from a Napa, or if I needed an aftermarket part, it's going to be more likely that those aftermarket parts are going to be more available. So I'm like, all right, the only downside to doing this then is that I have to get new wheels. For the benefits I'm getting out of committing to go this route, I think it's worth new wheels.
Yeah. Don't think it's a bad idea.
I'm going to be spending all this money putting together these freaking axles. Why not go with something that is going to be really badass, kick ass, last a really long time, and be way overbuilt for what I'm going to be using it for? Why not?
Yeah.
So
because you can.
Because I can. Exactly. Right. So I'm like, you know what? All right, let's look down this route of 05 and up Super Duty unit bearings. What realm does that get me into now for knuckles?
Okay.
Spider track's out of the question.
Yep.
And so I was like, I know nothing about 1-ton knuckle designs. I know nothing about what's out there for Dana 60, Dana 70 outer knuckles. I was like, I don't know anything. So I started asking people. I was like, hey, where should I start looking? And I talked with Will over at Metal Cloak.
Yep.
Because he's running some of the Reed Super Kingpins.
Oh, cool.
Knuckles on his JL. Sorry, Will.
Yeah.
Will's going to be upset now. I'm going to get a text from him.
Yeah. 5,
4, 3. Here he comes. And so I was like, so I started looking into the Super Kingpin design. I was like, that's a stout knuckle. Those knuckles are engineered essentially with the similar strength of 2.5-ton Rockwell knuckles.
Wow. Okay.
Equivalent. So I'm like, all right, we got this. I'm looking at Super Kingpins now. Like, what can I run on Super Kingpins for brakes? Do we have? And I started looking at it, and I called Willwood, and I was like, hey, what do you guys have that can run for Super Kingpins? And the 05 and up Super Duty design unit bearings. And the guy I was talking to didn't have a clue what I was talking about.
Really?
And I was like, dude, I was like, you know, the 05 and up unit bearing. He goes, can you describe what you're talking about? And I was like, it's what your wheel mounts to in between your wheel and your knuckle. It's the unit bearing. It has he goes, you're talking about the spindle? And I was like, well, the spindle's built into it. He goes, why do you keep saying unit bearing? What is that? And I was like, I'm sorry. I literally had to stop the conversation. I was like, I'm sorry. Did you just ask me what a unit bearing is? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, and you work at Willwood? He goes, that's where you're calling. And I was like, I'm sorry. Okay, this makes a lot more sense now. Can I talk to somebody else who knows what a unit bearing is? And so he had to transfer me to somebody else who knew what a unit bearing was. And once I got to that guy, I was talking to the right person. So we went through a bunch of the different options, and Willwood does not make any brake hats to connect their rotors to an 05 and up Super Duty unit bearing.
Probably why the guy didn't know what one was.
Probably. And I was like, really? You guys don't have any brake hats for an 05 unit bearing?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, well, no, it doesn't look like it. And I was like, that blew my mind. I was like, okay, where do I start looking for these then? Like, how do I find brake systems that are compatible with F250, F350 outers? And they were like,
Ford.
Pretty much. They said to go factory. And I was like, I can't go factory. If I go factory, then I can't run 17-inch rims because they are massive 6-piston calipers.
Wow. Okay.
That I can't fit them in 17-inch rims. Like I asked him, I was like, what? I said, if 20s? I did go to Fords, I'd have to go to 18s or bigger.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, well, then that limits my tire options. Again, back to what we originally, I think one of the first things we started talking about is tire options.
Unless you go to 20s.
Unless I go to 20s. But then I mean, I know, right? Then I can get into 42s. So I'm like, no, I want to keep 17-inch rims. So I need to figure out what caliper setups you guys have that can work on these knuckles. And they said they don't have any. So I'm like, somebody has to have figured this out.
Yeah.
I was like, I know there's a bunch of Ultra 4 cars out there running 17-inch rims and 05 and up unit bearings. What are they doing for pistons and calipers and rotors?
So you called the Gomez's.
I wish. I called up Cody. Hey, Cody, what's going on, man? No, and so what I ended up doing was I was like, I'm at a loss here. So that's when I reached out to iRate 4x4. And I was like, hey guys, I'm kind of in a pickle. I don't know how to figure this out. Where should I start? And I was like, I'm not sure what to do with my outers. Here's what I'm doing on my axle. Here's my goal. Here's my plan. How do I figure out what brakes are working with this stuff? And 2 companies got brought up, Crane Axle and Busted Knuckle Off-Road.
Okay.
And so
Busted Knuckle makes sense.
Yeah.
I've never heard of Crane though.
Crane is also Wide Open Designs.
Oh.
So I don't know if you've heard of Wide. They do a lot of suspension components and everything. So Crane is their axle side of that company.
Okay.
And so they build some beefy, meaty axle components.
All right.
Like huge, big, it's regarded as, from my research, it's regarded as some of the biggest, beefiest stuff you can get.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right now. And what's really cool about Crane Axle is they put it all together in these bolt together kits.
All right.
I mean, like your knuckle isn't bolting onto the axle, but you have to weld on the inner C, and their C is custom machined there out of chromoly. Their knuckle, then the outer C and the knuckle is custom made out of chromoly. And they have this interesting adapter. It's about 1 inch wide that goes between their knuckle and the 05 unit bearing. And this adapter plate is what their brake kits then bolt to. And so this adapter plate is kind of the magical thing that makes everything just bolt together in these really handy, really well put together kits.
Interesting. Okay.
And I was like, I'm just running out of time to do this. Like my rig is down now. I've already cracked my frame. We're back from Rubathon. I'm trying to figure out all this.
Yeah.
Because realized I'm not going spider tracks anymore. And so I'm like, I just don't have time anymore. So these bolt-on kits, like bolt together kits. I don't want to say bolt on, but like they've got the inner C's, the outer knuckles, the unit bearing, the brake kits, and the rear weld-on cups they've designed to fit the same brake kits as the front.
That's nice.
I'm like, that they kind of have this really nice, really well put together thing that everything works together.
Yeah.
Super easily, super streamlined. My only beef with it was that adapter plate. It's held on by, I don't know how many bolts, but it's kind of like you can think of like a wheel spacer on a wheel, right? The wheel spacer bolts to your hub, and then you've got your wheel bolting to the wheel spacer.
Right.
That's the same setup, but it's between the unit bearing and the knuckle. So I'm like, okay, I really like the way this is all put together. It's really beefy stuff. I'm never going to break it. I'm never going to have issues with it.
Yeah, sure.
But it's really expensive. But I'm not spending $5,000 on a differential. So I'm like, maybe I can put a couple extra dollars into the knuckles and the outers then, since I'm not spending an extra $3,000 on the differentials. So I'm like, okay, I'm kind of like looking down the route of these Crane Magnum knuckles. And then somebody put out the busted knuckle off-road knuckle kits. And those ones are interesting because what busted knuckle does is they take junkyard parts. They'll take F250 and F350 axles and cut all the C's off of them, cut the knuckles off of them, and reuse the axles, sell the housings bare or build builder axles out of them or build axles for people out of the housings. And so the leftover C's and knuckles that they cut off of them, they sell them in their knuckle kit. Okay. So they're technically used parts, but it's like, those aren't wearable parts. So
yeah,
unless these axles that are coming in from junkyards
are bent
or people were jumping their F350s and destroying the knuckles on them or something, they're not going to have any issues in theory, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so when I started looking at them, they are half the price of the Crane knuckles.
Wow.
Half the price. So the Crane Magnum knuckle kit is about $4,500
total for both sides.
For both sides with tax and shipping, you're probably looking around $5,000. The busted knuckle off-road knuckles for both sides are $2,600.
So, but they're just their knuckles off of a F250 axle, F350 axle.
Yeah.
And but there's more to them, right? Because I mean, what's to stop you from just going out and buying an axle and cutting the knuckles off and using them?
Well, you're getting the knuckle, you're getting their ball joint eliminators, you're getting the unit bearings. I mean, all the same stuff that comes in the Crane kit also comes in the busted knuckle kit. It's just that Crane's knuckles are machined, USA made chromoly knuckles and C's. So there's a lot much more time put into making the parts than busted knuckles knuckle kit because they're just cutting them off of junkyard axles.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're getting not only just getting the C's, but you're also getting unit bearings. You're getting the knuckle. You're getting bearings and whatever else.
You're getting your ball joint eliminators, the lower ball joints, the steer arms. The other really nice thing that I really, really liked about the Crane arms was that they're keyed on the bottom side of the arm. So because they machine their knuckle, they machine this rib that sticks up out of the top of the knuckle, and it goes like the entire length of the knuckle where the arm sits on it.
Oh,
and
interesting.
then there's a cutout, a recess in the bottom of the arms. And so they go onto that, and it's keyed the entire length of the knuckle with 4 bolts. And then they use trunnion bearings. So similar to Toyota design for their steering with the load bolt in the top of the knuckle to set your steering preload.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I really like that design of the way that the arm sits on the knuckle, that key that goes along the entire length of the knuckle, and the bolt to set your steering preload. Tits, amazing. But they're double the price.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
nuts.
That's crazy. And I was like, it can be a really sleek setup. Never going to have issues with it. Double the price. Or I could go with the busted knuckle and have a little bit of money left in the budget for wheels as well, because I still got to buy new wheels, right? So I ended up going the busted knuckle route for that reason, and that the busted knuckle route means that I don't know why. Just the only downside to the Crane knuckles to me was that adapter plate. It's just more complexity, right? There's another item there that can go wrong.
Sure. Well, and going with the stock F350Cs means that you're once again going back to can buy things from the factory.
Parts availabilities. Mm-hmm. Yep. There's multiple places that I can get parts from. Whereas if I go and get everything from Crane, I'm relegated to whatever Crane has in inventory. And that's it.
Yeah.
Which they're a great company. It seems like they keep really good stock of stuff. The customer service was awesome when I was talking to the guys, asking them questions. I really like the way their kits are all laid out. But yeah, by going with the busted knuckle off-road kit, I do get more parts availability. If I break stuff, half the price, which means I have money left over for new wheels.
Yep.
So I ended up going that route with the busted knuckle off-road kit, which means they send their unit bearings in 8x6.5.
Okay.
When the stock pattern is 8x170, 170 millimeters.
Okay. So they're not the same.
They're not the same. Correct. They're like a quarter of an inch difference.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
if that.
What do you do?
So what happens is the way that they do that is they take Timken 05 unit bearings and they leave the 8x170 holes in them and just drill 8x6.5 holes in them.
Oh, so slightly rotated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new set of holes.
So there's 16 holes in the unit bearing now instead of 8.
Okay.
So I'm like, that's kind of nice because now I have the option of either doing 8x6.5 or 8x70, 170.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I was like, I ordered it and got they're coming in, but the 8x6.5 is what I got. And so now I'll be running, they have a Willwood light brake caliper option, which is a 4-piston caliper, which I should in theory be running front and rear. So my unit bearings, and I also got the rear cups for the unit bearings from Bust Knuckle Off-Road as well.
Okay. Nice.
So that means I'm going to have the same unit bearing on all 4 corners.
Cool.
The same brake setup on all 4 corners.
Yes.
And the same differential front and rear.
That's smart. All good ideas.
So kind of spare parts universality, I guess.
Yeah.
That takes care of 70-80% of parts on axles.
Yeah. Now you need to put a
items.
carrier bearing on your rear drive shaft so that you can make the angle, the one that goes from your CV or your double cardan down to your axle, the same length front and rear.
Then I have the same rear span drive shaft. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
So what I'm having to do on Samantha is I'm going to do a carrier bearing on the front.
Okay.
So that the front axle and my rear axle will be drive
shafts are going to be the same. Nice. That's cool. I didn't think about doing that. I may have to look into that now.
Yeah.
When during the build. So,
because then one drive shaft and you've got front or rear covered.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing, so are you still able to do selectable hubs?
Yes. There's lots of different hub designs. I'm going with mile marker.
Okay.
Because they just have treated me really well with their customer service. And I like supporting companies that put a lot of effort in their customer service. So, mile marker hubs, selectable. E-lockers, front and rear selectable. The unit bearings, I'll be able to, I'm still up in the air whether or not I'm going to run the 8x170 or run the 8x6.5. I'm leaning more towards the 6.5 because the race line has wheels that are 17 by 9.5. And I want that 9.5 for the extra width for snow wheeling.
Okay. They don't. Okay. So
Otherwise,
they don't make a 17 by 10.
They don't. And they don't. The biggest size they make in the 8x170 is 17 by 9s. I'm like, I don't know if that extra half inch is going to make any difference, but like, I really like my snow wheeling. And so I'm like, I want the 9.5.
Oh, geez.
So
Why don't
the
you
9,
just get wider tires
because they're not available from Yokohama in the 40s.
I know.
So, so if I run the stock 8x170,
I know somebody that's
pattern,
selling 38 by 1450 17s.
I can't go down in tire size. That's blasphemy, Jimmy.
I think he still has them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The if I stay with the 8x170 lug pattern, then that's a stock unit bearing, right? I can go to any auto parts store and grab a unit bearing. If I go to the 8x6.5,
it's not stock.
It's not the stock.
It's still a stock unit bearing. You just have to drill some new holes.
And the other thing that people have done is they've drilled out the 8x170 holes by like a quarter of an inch, half an inch. And I'm like,
That sounds bad.
That doesn't sound.
Sounds like there's play in there. That shouldn't be in there.
Play, but it would get me off a trail and back home, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm like, at that point, why don't I just carry a spare unit bearing with me of the right size?
Why don't you just order another one from Busted Knuckle that has both the bolt patterns in it?
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm like, that's kind of where I'm leaning towards on everything.
Okay, so I thought everything was ordered. So not
Pretty
everything.
Much all the knuckles, the outers, the brakes, the rear axle shafts, the third members, the lockers, the gears, the housings. Those are all ordered. Pretty much the only things I haven't ordered are the parking brake and the front axle shafts.
Okay, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I want some parking brakes.
You need some parking brakes when I place my order?
I told Cruise Moab I would have parking brakes next year.
Yeah.
So I need you to tag on some parking brakes for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think the only thing I'm going to really have to weld and fabricate is going to be the rear brake brackets for the parking brakes and the rear calipers. So other than that, it's on, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. I know that there's going to be listeners out there that have questions. And
I still have questions.
Or comments on how silly you are.
Uh-huh.
So if people want to write in, and I think our plan is to pretty much do a follow-up episode to this in regards to Tyler explaining some of his decisions.
Yeah, because this is the big thing that kind of got me in trouble on Irate is I don't know how to organize my thoughts sometimes, especially with something this complex is a good way of putting it. There's so many different parts up in the air here. And so many different priorities that I'm weird and I like to put different priorities, different values to different priorities. People started asking questions why I was doing something this or this way. And they'd be like, well, that's stupid. You need to be doing it this way. Or no, why would you ever do that? Or like they're hanging up on the e-lockers and the mile marker hubs of all things. And I'm like, I don't know how to.
So people would rather have you have ARBs than e-lockers?
Or spools. Like they're trying to say you're building this big of an axle. You need to spool it or put a Detroit in or something. I'm like, I want a selectable locker. And they're like, then you need to be doing ARBs. It's not our problem if you can't deal with airlines. I was like, the airlines isn't my issue with ARBs. So,
to me, is there something wrong with an e-locker?
So yes, according to them, according to two guys that are like vehemently against everything I'm doing on Irate, e-lockers are horrible, terrible things that should never be in vehicles, but they can't tell me why.
Okay.
So all they say
just
is
like
they're
Jeeps
terrible.
Shouldn't have 4 doors.
Yes. It's that kind of thing, right?
And how dare they make IFS rigs?
Yeah. And I've asked them, I was like, well, what's wrong with mile marker hubs? Is there something wrong with their hub design? Like, seriously, if there's something wrong with their hub design, I want to know about it. And they can't tell me why the mile marker hub is a bad decision.
Well, that's because they just want you to go to a spool
and drive slug it. Yeah, they want me to do a slug.
Yeah, because some of your arguments are, I want simplicity.
Yes.
Yet
I'm adding complexity.
Some complexity on that end.
Yeah. So yeah, and they're like, and I'm like, you guys, the stuff that you're saying is contradictory. And they're like, well, what you're saying is all contradictory too. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that in some way, but like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain the value I'm putting on specific priorities over other priorities. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if people have any questions for you, you can write in to Tyler at snailtrail4x4.com. And we're going to compile those because I do know that this axle build is off the wall and random.
Totally. 100%.
Crazy and unique. And I know people out there are going to have some questions. So we're going to compile those questions and we're probably going to answer them on a future episode.
Yeah.
If we don't get a lot of questions, we'll just answer them via email. We'll probably answer via email anyway, and then compile the questions and answer audibly in the future.
Yep.
That said, if you also want to get a hold of me for reasons of why I'm still on Toyota axles, you can message me at jimmy@snailtrail4x4.com. You can find us. I'll just go through the whole list now before we get any deeper. You can find us on Instagram. Tyler's over at 4x4 Toyota Tyler. I'm at SnailTrail 4x4. Or you can call in and leave us a voice message and we can answer it on the podcast. 916-345-4744.
Yeah, man. I like it. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what people's questions are as well, because again, I don't know how to organize my priorities in my head. I just know that with some things I want it this way, some things I want it this way, other things I want it a different way, and I don't know how to. I'm hoping that by people asking questions, we can figure out what is going on in my head.
I don't think we'll ever know.
I don't know if we'll ever know either. And who knows, this whole idea may completely not work whatsoever. And then I'll just end up buying F-250 Super Duty axles, throwing them under. I don't know.
I sure hope somebody writes in and convinces you in an email to get 9 inches.
I don't know. Well, I don't think they could. I don't think they could, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at this point.
Not at this point. I mean,
Your
not
credit
until
card's too deep.
No, not necessarily. I don't have any experience running the 10.5-inch third members in an off-road setup. And I don't know of many people that
there
do.
Aren't. There aren't many people
and
that
so
do.
like, I don't know if there's a case that can be made for or against the 10.5s, because there's not a whole lot of people that have run them before.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe they will suck. Maybe they are going to be terrible design and they're not going to work for off-road applications compared to a 9-inch.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I'm curious. One of my curiosities is ground clearance underneath that third member.
I am a little concerned about ground clearance.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Because you're going from an 8-inch
Mm-hmm.
to a 10.5.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and on a lot of the Super Duty axles and 14 bolts, you can do some shave kits and get some decent ground clearance back.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 inches aren't too much larger than an 8-inch.
Not a stock Toyota 8-inch axle, correct?
Yeah. So a Ford 9-inch is almost the same
as a stock
ground clearance
Toyota
height
8-inch.
as a Toyota 8-inch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, there's some interesting arguments in regards to ground clearance, whether the 10.5 is even a good idea.
I 100% agree. I may get the 10.5s, figure out it's a fantastic, beautiful differential, but I kitch it on everything, and then I'll go to 44s.
There you go.
So I get my ground clearance back.
And then you're going to be too tall,
Yeah,
and we're going to
right.
have to lower your rig.
Yes, either that or I'll do portals, one or the other.
And then we'll have to lower it even more.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, geez. I still think, I want Hussman, you listening? I want Hussman to figure out the Porto Box Spider Tracks knuckle thing.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And then I want him.
And then
I want him back.
You're just going to steal him.
I know his door key combo.
Right.
And I know his dogs, so they won't attack me. They'll just cuddle.
Cuddle you to death. Cool, man. I like it. I'm really curious to see what questions people have, or like, even if you want to write in and tell me I'm stupid, go for it. Because I think I'm stupid, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun in the process.
And he needs people to reassure him that he's stupid. So just
I do
that.
100%. All right, man. Cool. You guys know how to get a hold of us. Leave us a voicemail, leave us an email, contact us on Instagram. We love hearing from you guys.
Yeah. Write us a review. We haven't pushed that one recently.
Oh, that's right. We haven't even read reviews in a while.
We haven't read reviews in a while. I think we're over 400, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we've got, so leave us a review at 450 reviews. We are doing another swag pack giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
And at 500 reviews, we're going to give away a winch.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we haven't mentioned anytime recently is we have merch at Snail Trail 4x4. And we have gear wrench tools up on that website as well. So if you're looking for some tools or looking for Snail Trail merch, you can find that on snailtrail4x4.com.
Cool. I like it. And then you guys remember to go and leave some questions for episode 350. That link is in the show notes down below. So with that, Jimmy,
I think we need to make like a checklist for people.
a checklist.
Yeah. Here's everything I need you to do this week.
Yes.
That should have been my final words.
Jimmy, final words for everybody.
I think we need to make a checklist for everybody.
And with that, my friends, keep crawling.
I got one for you.
You do?
I do.
I think I have one too. Hold on. I thought I saw one written down in my notes here.
All right. Well, then, should I save mine for Monday's
No,
episode?
No, go ahead. I don't have one.
All right. Did you hear about the man who fell into the upholstery machine?
Was he floored?
He fully recovered.
He fully I got it. Nice. That one's good.
Thanks.
I wouldn't have catch that one.